Oh.
Ooh.
God darn it. Wrong typing thing. Darn it.
Your studio's too fancy.
I have too many keyboards and too many tracky mousy thingies. Too many, and there's a child with an iPad back there. Can you see him in the corner? No. Okay, good. All right, we're live, everybody. Let's make this show a thing. Let us begin the begin. Dun, 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 dun. It is time to do this. Welcome, 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 everyone out there. Okay, starting in. This is going to be the whole show. My world right here. Can you hear him eating snacks?
No.
Great. That is good. Okay, starting in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 684, recorded on Wednesday, August 22nd, 2018. Birds, bees, and genes. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and this is This Week in Science. Tonight on the show, we are going to fill your head with gene editing, animal survivalists, and water everywhere. But first...
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Not all plans play out like you plan them, leaving you muddled up. This is why we plan things in the first place, to avoid meandering about in the middle of a muddle without a map. And yet, even with the best laid plans, we can wind up mapless in Muddlesville. But for the intellectually mindful, even Muddlesville has its must-see moments. The unplanned adventure, the unexpected detour, the uncharted course all become potential gold mines for the otherwise inconceivable application of the unconventional opportunity to adapt. In plain English, if I must. If there has ever been anything worth remembering, it is this. What you learn when things go wonky teaches you more than you would ever learn if things just happened the way you had planned. And nothing proves this more than the fact that you have meandered your way into another episode of This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to everyone out there. That's right. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We're here. We're going to talk about science this week. Okay. Okay. You got it? We're going to talk now about science. Everyone out there. All right. Okay, everyone. We are here with the science in hand, in our spreadsheets, in our minds. We're here to discuss all the science. I brought show stories about water on the moon, water on Earth, and a crazy idea about the universe. It's crazy. What do you have for us, Justin?
I've got Neandertal news. The history of life on Earth every day. Life gets a little bit older. And marijuana worms.
I don't even know where that story is gonna go. Oh my gosh. Okay. Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I have a couple of stories all about survival of the fittest, or laziest, or pointiest. And in our short science news towards the end, I have some bummers that are also important conservation information you should arm yourself with for the future.
Never It's never survival of the snarkiest, which I always think is too bad.
It's
feel like
always survival
world-
of the snarkiest.
Is it? Okay, good, because I feel like I have a better shot.
That goes without saying.
Oh, wait. So
Is she frozen?
as we jump into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can subscribe to TWIS as a podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Podcast Portal, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn. Also, if you're watching us on the YouTube, you can below me click the subscribe link, and then you'll get updated when there's a new show available. Or you could just Google This Week in Science anywhere, I think, and this show will pop up. Or visit twist.org. But now it's time for some science.
Yeah. So, Justin, maybe you should start us off here.
Well, if I had been better prepared, I'd be. Oh, yeah. So this story got sent to me mere moments ago, hot off of the Science News presses, and it's pretty wild. So back in 2012, there was a finger bone discovered. Now, this sort of thing happens from time to time, but this was in a cave in Siberia, and initially they thought, this is an old layer of dirt in this cave in Siberia. This is probably a Neanderthal finger. We should send it to the world expert on decoding Neanderthal DNA to see if we can get some DNA out of this and confirm what we think we found. Small little bit of a finger. So they sent it, of course, to Svante Pabo, who is the person whose name I have said many times on this show before. He also works at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology and sort of the pioneer for the techniques involved with decoding Neanderthal DNA. And Svante looked at it and said, it's not a Neanderthal. It's something else. It's something new. It's something different. The cave that this was found in Russia gave it the name. It was the Denisova cave, so it was Denisovan was the name given to this hominin of which we had not known. And since we have found Denisovan DNA in human DNA, little snippets of it in Russia and some parts of the islands off of the Southeast Asia, which is interesting. Now it turns out, with a deeper dive, they've discovered that this finger bone isn't completely Denisovan. This has a parent that is, one parent is a Neanderthal and the other parent is Denisovan, making this a Neanderovan, Denisiander or Nisiandervan. It just you can make it up now. It's up to you.
Is it Neandervan or a Denisoverthal?
Right. Like it's all of it. It's this hybrid of these two, and we had figured out already. Amazingly, they had figured out, based on backtracking, back engineering the DNA that shows up in modern humans that has Denisovan origin, that it also must have had Neanderthal influx at some point. But this is, this child. Okay, so I'm calling the finger a child. They believe the finger bone belonged to a 13-year-old child.
Back then, that was a man.
Not a 13-year-old today who's missing their finger.
Right.
This would have been hundreds. What is it? 100,000 years ago or more? It's way in the way back machine. Unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me. But this child would have had both Neanderthal and Denisovan ancestry, or parents. Their parents must have been one of those. And actually, I think even in the case, they also could suss from that that one of the parents also had, the Denisovan parent also had Neanderthal further back in the timeline. And this is something I think we could have suspected and sussed out from the fact that over the years, this particular cave has been populated by both Neanderthal and Denisovan, going back through the layers and sometimes switching back and forth. And it's one of these sort of on the cusp of, I mean, this is about as far east as you would expect ever to find a Neanderthal, about as far west as a Denisovan has ever. Well, we only have this one Denisovan finger, and it turns out it's a hybrid. But from the other DNA that we've been able to collect and back engineer, this is as far west as Denisovans seem to have gotten. So this is the meeting ground of the two. Svante Pabo says here, it is striking that we find Neanderthal Denisovan, this Neanderthal Denisovan child, among the handful of ancient individuals whose genomes have been sequenced. So this is the filter of the few specimens that we've found, and of those, that which we've sequenced. And here it is, it's already a hybrid. And he goes on to say, Neanderthals and Denisovans may not have had many opportunities to meet, but when they did, they must have mated frequently. Much more so than previously thought.
I mean, what did we think previously? This is all based on percentages of DNA that has been found so far within the very limited genetic material that we've had a chance to look at so far. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But we've always thought there was this kind of this weaving notion with Neanderthals and humans, right? That there was this in and out throughout history. So this isn't that shocking to hear about any sort of hominid, right?
Right. I mean, we've come to this at this point to be very comfortable with this braided stream of hominin evolution. That if it looks like a human, walks like a human, smells relatively humanish, humans are gonna go, yeah. Right.
I mean, you say we're relatively comfortable with it, but I honestly, it's only within the last few years that it has started coming out as a publicly told story that we have evidence behind. And until very, very recently, it was maybe a smaller percentage of even the anthropological and archaeological communities who thought that there were more than one, that there was possibly more than one instance of origination, that this braided stream was something that happened. Yeah, for a couple of years we've been talking about, the Neanderthals and humans, probably, but, until recently it was maybe the idea that humans outcompeted Neanderthals, right?
Instead of just
that we beat them down.
Yeah. But that's kind of, I wonder if it has anything at all to do with genetic testing and genetic, like 23andMe or the kind of genetic tests that people do, because Neanderthal shows up on those tests, right?
Yes.
So I feel like that overall has made people feel a little bit more comfortable with the idea.
People in general, yes.
Kind of this braiding, as you called it in the past. And
I think Kirsten is talking more about the elder anthropologists and the story of evolution that they were
those
telling.
People, yes.
Which I don't mean to braggadocious upon myself too much, because I get really weird about doing that, because then I have to bring up all the other counter arguments. But the first time I looked at those skulls in the textbook that showed this and then that and then this happened, I was like, that's nonsense. Like, that really never made sense. Like, okay, one day now a Homo erectus is born, and from now on humans will be like, oh, no, that's just not feasible. Like, there's no scenario upon which that makes any sense. And so it never seemed like a weird thing to me. This seems like common sense is being filled in more than a big revelation, right? But these are the Denisovans and the Neanderthals, to understand now that they had a much potentially closer relationship. While not totally unexpected that we would find this, Denisovan still a bit of a mystery, but these are also two groups of hominins that had their own separation from each other, because they have these small populations and they don't travel a whole lot. You know, they were about as different, I believe, as the modern-ish humans who met the archaic-ish Neanderthal and got together. So,
yep. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's an interesting story, and I mean, we need more finger bones,
More fingers.
more fingers, more teeth, more of these gene.
Everybody, send in your
holding-
fingers. I mean, the fingers you find. I mean, never mind.
So this is kind of what's interesting, though, is that we actually have much more Neanderthal DNA that we've been able to discover in modern living humans than we have found from fossil samples. I mean, we can identify the difference now in population. What was a Neanderthal derived gene to which we could almost bring back a Neanderthal in terms of something that we could say was not a 200,000-year-old African origin hominin out of this Neanderthal DNA that's just floating about among society. Because it's you know, when people see that 23andMe and they've got the 1-2-3% Neanderthal DNA, that's not to say that that's the only percentage of Neanderthal that we have an accounting of, because your 1-2-3% is different than my 1-2-3%, which is different than their 1-2-3%.
Absolutely. Yeah, it adds up. It adds up, and then you can add up those few fossil remnants.
Yes.
I don't know, but what's really cool here is that this is an identified individual who we've been able to say mommy and daddy, two different two different types of hominid.
Neander mama.
Yeah.
Denisovan daddy.
So it's a Neandertal.
Would it start with the dad first?
Yeah, it starts with the dad. Yeah. So
Neanderthal. Okay.
Yes.
Not a
Denisovertal. No. Something there. But let's just pray that Justin never becomes a billionaire or a trillionaire, because we'll have Neanderthals and mammoths just running amok. Because that's what he wants.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you know what's going to be happening soon is we will be running amok on the moon, mucking about on the moon.
Airbnb on the moon?
Airbnb, where you'll just turn on the tap and have a nice, fresh glass of ice cold water. That's right. Yes. New data is out in the September. It's going to be coming out September. No, this just came out this week on new data on the moon. The moon has water. Faux show. This is something that is official. This news has come out previously, and we have sightings of the craters of the moon, these shadowy areas of the moon where water has been found. And once and for all, though, we've got it. There's new details from the Chandrayaan, India's moon probe, that was able to get the mineralogy, the infrared light wavelengths of light to be able to determine it's water. Water on the moon. Yep. For sure.
Nice. So this is something we've thought for a while, but we just haven't had 100%.
We haven't had the 100% absolute detection of water ice on the surface of the moon. It's like
We haven't?
no, it's like the 95%.
Good enough. And we got it a
Super
couple
close
times.
to infrared mapping, and we've done other stuff previously, and we've had these stories before. And actually, I was like looking, and I had a story in the rundown that I might have sounded a little confused for a second because I realized that the story I picked for the rundown is like an older story of water on the moon. And then I realized, no, but this is new news. It's not in Science in September. It is published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences this week, and it is from an instrument on India's Chandrayaan-1 spacecraft, which explored the moon between 2008 and 2009. The Moon Mineralogy Mapper looked at 3 specific signatures of water ice on the lunar surface, and not just reflective properties, but also the absorptive aspects of how the molecules absorb infrared light. And so they were able to differentiate between liquid water, vapor, and solid ice. And they were able to really confirm that in these shadowy craters that never see the light of the sun, that yes, indeed, this is ice sitting on the surface of the moon. This is within the top few millimeters. This is not under the surface of the regolith. This is on the surface of the moon. And there's potentially enough of it that this is the kind of stuff that could be used for drinking water.
So you're saying I can go ice skating? on
Yes,
the moon.
right. There are little millimeters on your razor wafer thin ice skate blades. That's
Well,
right.
but I won't weigh that much. And then if I fall and hit the ice, it won't hurt as much because there won't be as much gravity, right? So like,
Yeah.
sounds perfect.
Yeah. So if you think you've heard this news before, you have heard this news before, but not with as much assurance. This is even more assurance that yes, there really is water on the moon.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I do feel like I've heard this story. I feel like we've not just heard it. I think we've reported on this story a few times in different ways. Like then we hit the moon with a rocket, and then watch the vapors come up from. So
Well, until there's a travel agency that has a resort on the moon, who's to say?
yeah,
Just like a half a dozen people.
I don't even.
Or
That's not
really.
even like appealing to me. Like being that I am on the moon right now.
Yeah.
It still seems like until we can figure out how to vaporize, I don't care about the drinking water. I want it vaporized, and I want enough of it that the gravity of the moon can hold it in place and create a little moony atmosphere. I don't want to be a.
We don't want to mess with the moon too much, or we're going to mess with our own tides.
No, you're not going to
Not-
mess
not
up the
by affecting-
tides.
Well,
The tides will be fine, Blair. They won't be affected by an atmosphere.
I'm
on the moon.
concerned.
No,
I
it'll be
mean,
fine.
I think it'll be easier to put structures on the moon in which there's nice recirculated air inside of those structures than it would be to put an atmosphere on the moon. I have a feeling that's not going to be happening anytime soon. But what structures, various places all over the moon, resorts on the moon, mining operations on the moon.
What's there to mine? Okay, what is there to mine on the moon?
To other
Ice
places
when there's
and-
none left
What has
here.
the moon got that we can't mine somewhere on this planet? It's just
Well,
the
the
moon.
idea, it is our moon, and it is made up of the same stuff that the Earth is, absolutely. But things that are rare here on Earth will still be there on the moon. And so we may be able to find deposits of things that are hard to find here on Earth, also on the moon. And we're doing a great job of using stuff up here. So
Yeah.
maybe we need to go elsewhere to get things. And
Right,
also,
like ice.
and if we're going to go, here's the validation for this, or the reasoning for this. If we're going to go out into space, it doesn't make sense to bring raw materials from Earth into space. Why not mine them in space for helping us get that jump start to elsewhere?
But again, if we change the mass of the moon, won't that mess with our tides eventually?
No, it's fine.
Meh.
You're gonna be fine.
Yeah,
gonna
no,
be
we're not
fine.
going to be fine. We're not going to be fine because
Blair?
everything's melting.
Blair, wait. Blair,
Everything's
here's the thing.
melting.
Everything
let's
that
talk
we
about
take off
science.
of this planet and move to the moon, if it increases the mass of the moon, it has decreased the mass of the Earth by the exact same amount. The relationship won't change.
Kiki?
All right. We're moving on to the
Something
next
about melting?
story. A wave from the moon. Moving on to the next story, everyone. Let's keep this show rolling because we're late as it is. So, the planet, we're messing it up as it is. But hey, there are all these feedback loops and things that get started once we jumpstart things with our greenhouse gas emitting and everything that we're doing, like, melting the permafrost in the Arctic. And you'd think that the permafrost would stay frozen meters below the ground. But according to some new NASA funded research, that gradual thawing of the Arctic is speeding up because of these things called thermokarst lakes. So, thermokarst lakes form when a lot of ice in the deep soil melts and the water takes up less space than ice. So, the water collects from other sources like rain and snow, and then you have these little lakes. And because they're lakes and not ice, that means that they thaw the stuff around them and they flash thaw the permafrost. So instead of centimeters of thaw, which is pretty common for terrestrial environments, they have seen 15 meters of thaw beneath newly formed lakes in Goldstream Valley within the last 60 years, where they have been measuring this, according to ecologist Katie Walter Anthony from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Permafrost covers about 24% of the exposed Arctic northern hemisphere, and that's a lot of it. The ground in some places can be frozen up to 80 meters. But the permafrost, we know, is not completely permanent. And so with warm weather, it will thaw a bit and it can melt. However, the deep Arctic has been this frozen ice cube for a very long time, and now it's not so much. And by the way, I believe that there is going to be one of the first shipping vessels going through the Northern Passage this summer. So
How good for them.
how great. So the sea ice is melting. Shipping vessels are taking a northern route for the first time ever. And thermokarst lakes are melting the permafrost to very deep levels, not just the surface, but deep into the permafrost. And the deeper you go, the further back in time you go as well. So microbes and organisms from our past will be thawed out and potentially released into the environment, along with a lot of methane and other greenhouse gases, which will go on to do what, Blair?
Make everything hotter and melt more ice.
That's right.
Which
That's
I
right.
wonder, as these areas of permafrost melt, if they're going to create more political troubles, because these areas that have previously been these international spaces that have not been contested over, people have just gone there and done research and that's it. If they become usable space when permafrost melts, if there's going to be some conflict to use that space as we run out of space elsewhere.
Yeah, well, at least the permafrost, those melty permafrost areas are not super stable ground.
Yeah,
We know
not yet.
we know in Siberia, for example, that many just holes have opened up in the ground as the permafrost has melted. Just whoomp.
Yeah.
Hey, there it is, a hole in the ground. So we don't want to build a lot of stuff in there right now.
No, hang on. Am I wrong in thinking that there is no North Pole?
It moves.
I mean,
if you're talking about magnetic north.
But no. I'm not talking about magnetic north. I'm talking about there's not like a landmass there. Like
there's land
when you
that
leave
is
Greenland
not
or Canada or Siberia or northern Russia, it's just ocean. It's just frozen, right?
It's sea ice.
Yeah. It's just frozen. There's
yes,
no
but
there
it's going to become shipping lanes, and it's going to become spaces that will be sought after.
Oh, you know what? There's like laws of the sea that override what any nation wants to do. The old captains drew up a map of the rules of the sea a long time ago.
And it'll never change, and we have no concern.
It'll never change, and it never does. But and there's not enough fishing up there right yet. Well, I guess we're going to move north.
Yeah.
But the big thing to remember is they're only doing this during the summer. Like, oops, I don't know how they did that. I turned off my camera by accident.
Turned it off.
Um,
So anyway,
it's
this
okay,
thermokarst
Don't get worried until they're doing that northern route
all year
in
long.
the winter. Yeah, that's when it's trouble. Right now, everything's fine. Nothing to worry about, people.
Sure.
Continue on as
Yeah.
it happened.
The researchers explained in their paper about the thermokarst lakes that abrupt thaw accelerates mobilization of deeply frozen ancient carbon, increasing carbon-14 depleted permafrost soil carbon emissions by approximately 125 to 190% compared to gradual thaw alone. So lots of emissions. So anyway, strange lakes, thermokarst lakes in the Arctic, speeding things up. That's great. And other things that might speed things up in terms of human evolution, genetic editing and genetic engineering. So researchers in China have published on their efforts to use CRISPR to edit the genomes of embryos, early embryos, with mutations for something known as Marfan syndrome. Marfan syndrome affects 1 in 5,000 people around the world, and it affects the body's connective tissue. It can cause issues in the heart, the eyes, the brain, all of these things, and they can be potentially fatal. And there's a 50% chance that a person who has Marfan syndrome will have a child with Marfan syndrome. So it would be great if we could gene edit it out of the population. That would be great. The researchers published their study in Molecular Therapy on their methodology, which goes about using CRISPR to go straight to the base DNA and use a technique called base editing. This is a technique that's been used and known about since about 2016. And in this technique, the CRISPR system goes in to just swap out one letter of DNA, a base pair, for another letter. So an A for a G or a C for a T. And they used their study to correct a G, a guanine base in the FBN1 gene to an adenosine, an adenosine A. Is that right? Adenosine? Yes. And no, adenine. Adenine. There we go. To adenine, to a healthy A. And so for the most part, in 18 viable human embryos, the G was changed in almost all of them. There were 2 embryos that had an unintended change where a C was changed to a T. So it's not perfect 100%. It's about, out of their 18 viable embryos, it was about 80% accuracy, which is fairly good, but not necessarily good enough to move this forward. But this is a pilot study showing proof of concept and the potential of base edited gene therapy. Yeah. CRISPR editing for the future.
Yeah. Real life application.
Yeah, real life application. Anyway, is it time for something animally?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Something zoological, perhaps?
Something zoological. This is This Week in Science, and around this time, it is time for something we know as Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
I have 2 stories about survival of the fittest. This first one is actually a huge, large-scale study looking at 5 million years from the mid-Pliocene to present, looking at 299 species, and they have decided survival of the fittest might be better called survival of the laziest.
Is it possible?
It is possible. Yes, this is a new large data set study of fossil and extant bivalves and gastropods in the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean has this huge catalog of species, gone and current, and they have found by looking at their metabolic rates, or the amount of energy the organisms need to live their daily lives, higher metabolic rates were a reliable predictor for extinction. Survival of the laziest. The difference for
Wow.
mollusk
So hummingbirds.
species,
The hummingbirds are totally at risk.
if they were a bivalve, if they were a clam in this case, yes. So the difference for mollusk species that have gone extinct over the past 5 million years and the ones that are still around today are all about their metabolic rate. Those that have gone extinct have higher metabolic rates than those that are still alive. So the implication there is that using less energy is a good predictor that you will survive. The metabolic rate isn't the be-all, end-all in this study. There are other factors at play, but the metabolic rate of an organism is a component and a very good predictor for extinction or survival. So the reason I bring this study up is a couple reasons. One is it's very interesting and it's kind of funny, but really I feel like this is a case of misrepresentation, bad PR. I don't know what to call it, but it's not laziness. It's being energetically conservative.
Or
right?
efficient.
Efficient, whatever you want to call it. But
Is that
it's-
what you millennials call hanging out on the couch all day?
yeah, I'm being energetically conservative right now. So I don't want to do any dishes, Mom. Anyway.
That would not be a survivalist tactic in my house.
Oh,
No.
But no, okay, so like if we took this though from the extremity of the really aggressive humans within society, I feel like I'm surprised that we actually even have people who are aggressive enough to like play professional sports at this point, because you would think throughout the bloody history of mankind, all the really aggressive people should have been weeded out by they all went to war and killed each other. And all that's left is the people who are like, I'll get you next time somebody insults the queen or invades a farm somewhere.
So I'd say there's two big differences between a human like yourself and a clam. And that is
Just only
Just two.
I only
two.
had two
One.
differences.
One is that they're filter feeders. They don't need to go anywhere or hunt anything or gather anything.
Neither do
open
I.
up-
Neither
They
do
open
I.
up that clam mouth and just take in whatever's in the water.
I basically open up my clam wallet and take in whatever's in the cart.
But how'd you get that money in that clam wallet? You had to work for it. So there's a difference.
I really-
The second difference between you and a clam is they are broadcast spawners. They just release their gametes into the world.
I'm
And
not seeing a
vertebrates.
whole lot of difference.
vertebrates, like ourselves, vertebrates have sexual selection and mating.
And huge
So-
parental involvement.
Yeah, there's all this kind of stuff. But so that all that stuff is essential to survival for us, for vertebrates. But for invertebrates, for bivalves, for mollusks, these guys, they really just have to hang on and survive. And where I think this study gets especially interesting is that they found through this study that the cumulative metabolic rates for communities of species remained constant. As individual species appeared and disappeared within that community, the cumulative metabolic requirement, metabolic rate, energy input, whatever you want to call it, was the same. Which means-
does that mean that the lower metabolic rate, the slower the energetically conservative, there would be more of them?
Potentially, and there would be more opportunity for other things. So if you're consuming a thing, there's more energy available in the community for those things to exist. And yes, there's more energy available for siblings, community members, whatever it is. So it makes sense to me. All of this makes sense to me. You know, energy can't be created or destroyed, right?
Right.
So there's this certain amount of stuff in a community. And energy comes from stuff. So if you have a certain allotment in a community, of course that's going to be stable. You can't create more resources out of nothing. So that makes sense. And then beyond that, there's this opportunity for more things, for longer life, whatever it is, with this more energetically conservative existence, this quote unquote lazy existence, right? So in the case of, again, bivalves, this is a predictor for extinction or survival. And I just bring this to the show because I think it's an important thing to look at as biologists, as conservationists, when they're looking at species that are at higher risk of extinction. This is obviously very important on that surface level. But I think, again, it's a good reminder when we're looking at animals, when we're looking at individual species, to remember to consider the biological community, the ecosystem. Because if there's a reduced energetic input, if we're harvesting something as humans and taking it out of a space, that's going to impact kind of the metabolic capacity of a space.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you were starting this story, I was like, oh, I need to look up links on biophysics and metabolism and the energetic aspects. It's like what energy in, energy out. This is systems science. And as you as you said, we need to think about our input. It's not just looking at these bivalves and going, oh, the lazy ones survive. The ones who have the lowest metabolic rate, they survive the best. It's how can we look at how we use resources from an environment and have the least impact on the largest number of species?
Yeah,
I just need a third reason that I'm not a bivalve because
well,
you don't live in a shell.
That sounds like a line of questioning for the after show. Stay tuned. My second and final part of the Animal Corner for today is all about pointy eggs. So last week on the show, I talked about long, skinny eggs.
From the cuckoos.
It's very fun. Well, this is all about thick-billed murres and common murres. And murres are seabirds, and they are famous for making nests on the edges of seaside cliffs, often at an angle. Eggs, as we all know, when we've dropped an egg trying to make breakfast, darn, they are very fragile. So how do these eggs exist on these seaside cliffs, getting smacked by the ocean waves and all this kind of stuff, wind, and
but you've got to be less predators, right? Like that's the trade-off.
Well, there's that, and also it might be the only land for thousands of miles in each direction. So
and energy conservation, right? Energy conservation.
Yeah.
You could fly inland and waste a lot of energy flying there and then back to the sea again. And by conserving energy, you have more time and energy and resources for the community to, like you were talking about in your other story.
Yes. So researchers had this question as to whether the weird shape of murre eggs, they're kind of pointy, whether this had anything to do with where these nests exist. And they used a really interesting method to test this theory. They didn't use real murre eggs. They actually used a 3D printer. They manufactured fake eggs in a bunch of different shapes and sizes within very small measurements of one another so that they could test and test and test and test these eggs in nests on different inclines on cliffs. So by altering the individual shape variables and testing them in a combination with each other and in these egg roll tests, they were able to determine that the factor most likely to keep the egg from falling off had to do with this conicality, coneness. Pointiness is really what that means. That's like the sciencey word for being pointy. So the degree to which the pointed end of the egg mimicked a cone suppressed egg displacement. This is the most reliable predictor for its likelihood of staying put on inclined surfaces. And so this story, I love this story because it raises the question, what does a myrrh egg and a wombat poop have in common?
They're pointy.
They don't roll.
They don't roll.
Wombat poops are shaped like cubes so that they don't roll.
Oh.
Fun
That's
fact.
right. Wombats have the weird cube.
Yes.
That does not make sense.
There we go.
I
We've
don't know
talked
if
about
that's
that.
a fun fact. That's a weird.
I think it's a
but-
fun fact.
but
It's
so-
a fun.
so- so
That's a
this-
fun fact.
Yeah.
So this cone, and you're saying cone. I'm picturing something, and I apologize to a considerable portion of the audience who is not old enough to remember this as a thing that kids would have as a toy in the household. But there were these inflatable punchy things.
Yes,
That were
the
cone-shaped and
clown
rounded
clown
at the top.
bags, right?
The
They were
clown
like
bags.
clowns, yeah. mhm.
Right. And because of the shape and a little because maybe there was a little sand in them. I don't even remember.
Yeah, there's sand in the bottom of it,
Okay.
for sure.
But they were weighted so that they wouldn't roll.
Mhm.
And then
So
you
you're
And this is-
your
close.
base.
But this would happen actually in these conical eggs where
Mhm.
the distribution of the yolk and the material in the egg, and there's always a bit of air in an egg there.
Mhm.
And I would imagine in these conical eggs, that air would be at the end of the pointy part, and the
And the
yolk
big side
and
down.
it would be big
Yeah.
side down. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're
Most
you're
likely.
you're very
Less
yeah.
rolling.
That's basically the same idea. So there you go. I have some pointy eggs on the screen for those of you watching the show. But this pointy egg, survival of the pointiest. There you go.
Survival of the pointiest. Indeed.
Mhm.
You should be more Kiki than Booba if you want to survive.
You know what I'd love to do? I would love to like find out how many eggs like get rejected from the consumer market from chickens because of a weird shape. Because the thing that like
Good
between
question.
this and the cuckoo story and the idea that there could be like niches for specifically shaped eggs to survive through natural selection means, it makes me wonder, like, how come all of my chicken eggs have always looked the same? Why is there never a disparity in my chicken egg shapes? And
Mhm.
maybe it's just a thing where there's like, ooh, can't put that in a carton. People will freak
Oh,
out.
that's
They'll be
absolutely what's
rioting
For
in the
sure.
streets.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah.
There's somebody sorting it and going,
Right.
or a
There's some sort of
computer that
sorting
sorts it.
machine or sorting human or sorting. But,
Yeah.
because
The
because
thing that
this
happens
is
most
a
often at
couple
the
of-
zoo that I see is a weird, you can see in this picture right here, a weird distribution of calcium. So something that's
Hmm.
wrinkling or puckering. That happens a lot with eggs.
Interesting.
And that doesn't affect the development of a baby inside, but it does affect its marketability. Mhm.
So if you were in a making up it a tundra that had a strong wind and the wrinkly eggs were less likely to roll away in the
Yeah.
wind because they would have a little more traction, like those would become the common egg of that area.
Yeah,
It just sort of
absolutely.
like, it's not something I'd ever given thought to. Just assumed eggs are always shaped like eggs. But you brought me
Mm-mm.
a couple of back-to-back stories week after week
Yeah,
of egg selection making the difference for
excellent.
survival.
I mean,
It's
you're not
excellent.
going to get your genes to go forward if your baby doesn't survive to hatching. So it's a pretty basic piece of selection. It's
Yeah.
really the first floor of selective processes, right?
There's the chicken and the egg of, the sexual
egg came first.
selection
Egg
aspect
came
first,
first.
and then
Egg
the egg.
always-
and all of
egg came
that.
That's if
before
we're in Europe. The
bird,
sexual
egg came
selection
before
is the
dinosaur.
zero floor. And then
Egg
the
came
egg.
before fish. Egg came before fish. Bacteria invented the egg.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break and you can ponder all these thoughts. So we will be back in just a few minutes so that we can yell over each other some more. This is This Week in Science, and we are going to be back in just a few moments with more stories and fun. Stay tuned.
can explain things you've heard with more than intuition. A lot of reason shows the way to go. New conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see.
Hey everyone, if you're wondering who sings that song, it is Jake Mann, and we have links to this music if you want to find it online in our show notes, and especially our show notes, the description on YouTube. If you're interested in finding out more about the music that is on the show, we do leave those links around so that you can search more. Thank you so much for listening to this show. We love having you here, and we hope that you stick with us even when we do shout over each other for various reasons. We do love doing this show every week. As you can tell, we enjoy each other's company. We enjoy talking about science. We enjoy coming to see you every week, getting to see those of you who are in the chat room and those of you we know are out there listening. We have such a great time talking to you, getting to talk with you, our friends, our listeners, about the things we think are so interesting in the world, and hope that we can get you interested in them also. And we hope that we can get you interested right now in helping TWIS out, helping keep TWIS going. There are a few ways that you can do that. So keep the show going week after week. All these episodes that we've done, if we want to do more, we're going to hit 700 at the end of this year. Oh my gosh, 700 episodes. Are you ready for that? So how can you help keep us going and hitting these big goals of ours? Well, you can head over to TWIS.org. That's one of the easy places to head. TWIS.org is the home of all things TWISy. And when you go there, you'll be able to subscribe. If you are not subscribed, you'll be able to subscribe to us on iTunes, on YouTube, Google Play. There's a nice link that takes you directly to those places if you have not yet subscribed, or if you want to tell somebody about the show and get them to subscribe. That's an easy place. So you don't have to remember names and web addresses and all. It's just TWIS.org. Click on that subscribe button. You can tell people how to find us. Another way you can help us out is by buying merchandise where a portion of the proceeds go to supporting the show. So if you head to our Zazzle store, you will be able to find all sorts of items. There are mouse pads, t-shirts, we've got pillows. We have a polo shirt for those of you who need something that you could possibly wear to work, mug, phone covers, all sorts of items, neat things for you to peruse, TWIS logo, or art from the many years of the Blair's Animal Corner calendars that have been produced for you year after year. There's another one coming. More art is in the pipeline. So that's something else. When we start telling you about the calendar, you can buy the calendar from us too. That'll be an easy one. But this merchandise does support the show. So if you head to that Zazzle store, zazzle.com/thisweekinscience, you will easily be able to find things with TWIS on them and support us and have things to wear and things to drink your coffee in. Also, you can donate just directly. If you don't need more stuff in your life, I get it, but you can donate. You can click on the donate button on the main page. It's yellow. You click on it and it takes you to a PayPal interface to be able to donate. Oh, look, my Kaspersky's getting in the way, but so I'm going to go backwards there. But you can go right through a PayPal interface to donate an amount of your choosing. On every show page, you click on the most recent show. You can listen to it in the page, scroll through the show notes, find what stories are in there. There are pink links at the bottom of the show notes for contributing $10 a month, $5 a month, $2 a month. This is recurring through PayPal so that you can have a recurring payment set up, set it and forget it, and help us month after month. If you like that idea but aren't into PayPal, Patreon. We have a link at the top of our main page. You can click on the Patreon link, and that will take you to our Patreon page, patreon.com, This Week in Science, where you can choose the level of your support. $10 per month is the lowest level, where we thank you at the end of the show. We thank you by name. If you want to be thanked by name, you put your name in there. We say thank you to you on the show. $10 a month. That's like $2 an episode. It's like a cup of coffee, really. Less than your weekly, your daily latte, right? So $10 a month. It's not going to be too much. But there are multiple levels of support. You're only charged once per month, but you can set it and forget it and continue to help us out. Really, help us keep this show going. Keep enjoying This Week in Science as much as we enjoy making this show happen. Please. We couldn't do this without you. We thank you for your support.
Can't explain things you've heard more than intuition. A lot of reason shows the way to go. New conclusion.
It's the hypothesis, the reasons, the only thing I need.
And we're back with more This Week in Science.
Yes, we are. And it is time now for This Week in What Has Science Done for Me?
Lately.
I love that everybody's getting into it now.
I'm on
Yeah.
this
Get it,
fun.
get it, get it. Our letter this week comes from Minion Brian P. Brian P. writes, "What has science done for me lately? I am an ER technician and we use hover mats, quote unquote, hover mats at the hospital." Well, I don't know. I want to know what this is.
I need to go to the ER now.
I know.
want to see one.
Hover mats at the hospital where I work to assist in patient handling. It uses a portable pump that inflates a mattress-sized pad with perforations in the bottom that let out a small amount of air, acting almost as a reverse air hockey table. It makes moving patients from one bed to another much safer for both the patient and us. It also makes the transition much smoother for the patient. So what has science done for me lately? It helps keep me safe when providing medical care to people of all shapes and sizes and abilities.
That's crazy. I did not know that was a thing that existed. I want to go try
Air
one.
hockey for humans.
I want to go try one out. I do. That sounds like it would be also like an interesting, because okay, scenario, something awful happens.
Uh-huh.
Boom, you're in the ER. You're being wheeled in a bed. They're like, Miss Bazdarich, Miss Sanford, Mr. Jackson, we're going to have to move you. Just be still. You're going to feel a slight push of air. Wait, what? What does that even mean? What are you talking? And then they'd be in the middle of this whole traumatic car accident-y post whatever thing that happened, where you'd be like, wow, this is really cool.
Someone's
Right,
just
and
blowing
then-
on your neck.
Right. You suddenly rise up from the bed and be moved and be like, oh, that was really awesome. Okay, this is all worth it now.
Suddenly technology takes light as a feather, stiff as a board to the next level,
Ooh,
right?
yeah.
You are hovering, you're floating.
Yeah, and
It's
you'll be
not
this
ghosts,
moment of
it's
joy
science.
of having discovered this thing, right back to the beep beep. Okay, we gotta get the heart pump and whatever the thing they're back doing. It's like, oh yeah, okay, this is intense. I forgot. For a second, I would have been totally removed from the moment and just been like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
Like, this is totally awesome.
Oh, I'm actually having a really good time. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's just one of the ways that that science and technology are helping caregivers give better care.
Thank you for sharing that, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah.
You've made my day, and I didn't even have to go to the ER to experience
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
So
But
just
he-
don't
someday-
hurt yourself to figure it out. Just Google it. There's information out there.
Although someday I may just want a tour of the ER so I can try this out when I'm
Yeah.
actually healthy, though.
Yeah, that'd
Just
be
for
fun.
fun. Everyone
Twist
out
short.
there. Yeah. Brian, thank you so much. Everyone out there, we need you to write in with your letters, your emails, your messages on Twitter, etc., Facebook, about what science has done for you lately. How has science helped you in your life? What is it doing for you day in, day out? How is it making these better, worse, whatever? What has science done for you lately? What does it do for you? Leave us a message on our Facebook page, facebook.com/thisweekinscience, or send me an email, kirsten@thisweekinscience.com. We're going to keep filling it with stories from you for as long as we can. Thank you. Justin, tell me a story.
So, as every day goes by, life gets a little bit older.
True.
Well, I mean, the research into finding out how long life has existed on the planet. There's a new study led by scientists from the University of Bristol. There's a combination of genomic and fossil data to explain history of life on Earth from its origins to the present day. And it's one of these difficult things because we have talked about this a lot on this show, where they find lichen-like artifacts of possibly the residues of life having been. We've pushed it back more than 3 billion years. There's a thing, though, that they're pointing out in the studies that when you get into that early fossil record, the quality of the data that you collect is really deteriorating when you get back beyond 2.5 billion years ago. And they say,
I mean, you'd think after a while it would start to deteriorate, right?
So this is Cody Voice of Holly Betts, who is the University of Bristol School of Earth Sciences. The problem with the early fossil record of life is that it is so limited and difficult to interpret. Careful reanalysis of some of the very oldest fossils has shown them to be crystals, not fossils at all. However, that's not to say that life isn't really old. So combining fossil and genomic information, this is co-author Tom Williams, also Bristol's, but School of Biological Sciences. Combining fossil and genomic information, we can use an approach called the molecular clock, which is loosely based on the idea that the number of differences in the genome of two living species, say a human and a bacterium, are proportional to the time since they shared a common ancestor. That's one of those, that's the argument for if we ever look at any other species and say they're not as evolved as us, chimpanzees aren't as evolved as humans. Actually, in terms of life from its origin, they're exactly as evolved as us. Just maybe not the changes that we would attribute weight to, but we've all evolved at the same rate. Right? So using this approach, and this is now another Quotey Voice, this time co-author, Professor David Pisani. He says, using this approach, we were able to show that the last universal common ancestor of all cellular life forms existed very early in Earth's history, almost 4.5 billion years ago. That is not long after Earth was impacted by the planet Theia, and the event which sterilized the Earth and led to the formation of the moon. So, two things. One, life has existed on the planet Earth about as long as there's been a planet Earth, and it dates back to the event that created the moon, which has water, which then could potentially have the origin of Earth's life somewhere within its fossil record.
Frozen.
Which is not in this.
No, that wouldn't happen. It wouldn't have it because it was molten the same way that the Earth was molten. Everything was sterilized. There was an impact, huge amounts of heat. Everything became molten. You had this chunk that flew out of what was the protoplanet Earth at that point in time, Theia, and yeah, it was a big molten mess of hot, gooey rock, and nothing survived that. There's not going to be a fossil record if there was life on Earth prior.
Okay, so if there was no life prior to, but still, this is also still David Pisani. He says this is significantly earlier than the currently accepted oldest fossil evidence would suggest. And if I've got my my archive of TWIS stories about the age of fossil life that we've pushed it back to about 3.3 to 3.5 billion years. It's an extra billion years that the clock suggests. Which, again, the preservation of the type of fossils that we're even likely to encounter and that sort of thing makes sense that there would be a gap heading backwards. Yeah. This is the thing that comes to mind too is immediately you go to life on other planets. What are the conditions that are required? What is it? The idea that as soon as our planet had a semblance of the atmosphere and water and could be the basic building blocks of what we would consider an Earth-like planet. The fact that life was there as soon as that opportunity arose.
Yeah.
Makes all of those Earth-like exoplanets that we've seen seem much more possible that they would contain a form of life if it took no time but the opportunity for it to exist. Wow.
I wonder also, if it happened so quickly after the impact that formed the moon, was it something about that impact that led to the right materials in the soup in the right place at the right time? Or had life gotten kind of started, or was the chemical stuff mixing on the proto-Earth prior? But then, that's wiped. That back to the drawing board, and then maybe it started all over again. And so, maybe this kind of thing is happening all over the place all the time.
And that really isn't something that I considered when I first looked at this story. But, when they say the Earth was sterilized, we have NASA sterilizing clean rooms with all of the knowledge of microbes that they have and all of the techniques that they have to sterilize.
No. We have human knowledge. We're not like massive bodies in space colliding with each other and creating intense pressure and temperature and multiplying the rock. That's not happening in those clean rooms.
Your assumption is that was like universally everywhere. Like as though, dare I say it, life could not find a way. There is a possibility that within all of the moltening and all of the pressuring, that there was something somewhere that had insisted that it would persist to some small degree, enough so that it could be preserved under a mountain of earth or ice, or perhaps, who knows how extreme an extremophile once was before we got to this sort of tepid planet. I
have a hard time. I have a hard time visualizing anything surviving a planetary impact.
Right. Well, not everywhere. Not at the impact site. Sure.
The whole planet went molten, Justin.
The whole planet. The whole planet, Kiki. What if?
Have you seen simulations? Yes, the whole planet. A big chunk of the planet flew out into space, and now we've got this moon. Our planet was like goopy gloppy, floating all over the place. There's some wonderful simulations of it available. Researchers have been putting together incredible simulations of the moon forming impact, and there's no way life made it through that. Chemical molecules, hardy molecules,
unless some of what is now the Earth was aerosolized.
Okay, all right, aerosolization.
But I find a sliver of a possible contingency to like the aerosolization of anything that would have been on the surface up into the atmosphere or space, and then recollected And I'm just guessing it was tardigrades, but I could be
and
wrong.
then you've obviously heard of flour in grain silos catching and exploding. So those aerosolized particles in space with a massive ignition point, they're fried. Everything's fried. We'll see. I don't know. But there are more ideas out there than what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Good old Roger Penrose is back with a new paper along with his co-authors, Daniel Ahn and Christoph Meissner. They have published a preprint in the Archive journal. And this preprint means that it has not been fully peer reviewed by the physics society community as of this point in time, but it is open for commentary from the community as it is a preprint before it goes to publication. Penrose is known for a lot of his interesting ideas on consciousness arising from quantum principles, which, still possibility for that out there. Nobody has proven it or disproven it as far as I am aware. But he is a mathematical physicist who comes up with really interesting ideas, kind of on the fringe of things. And he has come up with this particular crazy idea in another form before, but he's back with it again, slightly modified. And it's fascinating. What if there is a ghost of past iterations of our universe that exists within the cosmic microwave background radiation in our universe, the ghosts of dead black holes from previous iterations. So his idea is that the Big Bang is not just a bang expansion, matter is formed and everything spreads out forever and ever and ever. He likes the idea of a yo-yo universe, that things expand and contract and expand and contract, which would mean that there is a moment where there's the contraction in and then the expansion out, which could have been that what we call the Big Bang, right? Expanding out. And we're in expansion phase right now in our own universe. We have black holes in our own universe, and those are going to exist in our universe until the end of the universe. They're going to keep sucking down matter. And as our universe expands, and lights go out, the stars burn out and things go dark all around, and the black holes suck up all the material in their local neighborhood, and they've gotten as big as they can. They'll be the last things left as the universe expands to its cold death. And at a certain point, there's Hawking radiation, right? And so they're emitting radiation, and there's this little shadow possibly that is a result of, as this expansion happens before the collapse occurs again and the rebirth of the universe, that the radiation that is emitted from these black holes leaves an imprint. And so he and his co-authors on this study, have come up with a mathematical proof and testable hypotheses related to this idea. So they posit that there's a point when everything gets spread out and the radiation that comes from those black holes ends up being just like gravitons or photons, and they don't have any mass, and so they don't really care about space or time, and so it's an empty, ultra compressed universe, and it seems just like the beginning of the universe, compressed, and there's nothing there. So the new universe happens. Anyway, they are suggesting they've run a statistical test against patches of the sky to look at this faint cosmic microwave background radiation, which in the old days when we had televisions where you could look at the static on the screen, or if you tune your radio station to a static station, you're listening to the cosmic microwave background radiation, the sounds of the Big Bang itself. They have focused on particular areas of the sky to see if they could look for statistical anomalies within certain boundaries. And so they set certain limits, and then they used real data, and they also compared it to fake data that they randomly generated to kind of rule out the possibility of um, of uh, of of noise in the system. And so they asked the question, if the randomly generated cosmic microwave background data couldn't mimic these Hawking points, then that would strongly suggest that the newly identified points were from black holes of past universes. So anyway, it's crazy ideas about the universe, but this is where physics gets so exciting, where it's this theoretical physics, mathematical physics. It's using math to try and describe things that we can't actually personally experience. That can we set up a proof? Can we create a situation that we can actually go out and then test against data? And so in the past, Penrose had posited this in a previous paper years back, and with something similar, but he could not convince the physics community. And other people have said that they think random noise in their data affected the data in previous papers. And so this, of course, is going to bring up those same kinds of questions again. Is it random noise? Is it real? Are there ghosts of black holes lurking in space and time?
Sure.
Yeah, I run into them all the time. What are you talking about? You can't see them?
Honestly, if you asked about half of the things that we've discovered about space and physics in the past 5 years, 10 years ago, been like, you're crazy. I feel like, yeah, sure, why not? Possible.
Well, I mean, I probably don't I don't understand this.
No.
So the one thing about this that has always spoken to me is this idea of the oscillating, of the periodic expansion of the universe. Because when you think about it as a singular event, it's too limiting to me. Just like the idea that Earth is the only planet that has life, and just like this existence is unique for whatever reason. If you think about all that kind of stuff on a grand scale, it only stands to reason to me, just the way my brain works, that this Big Bang can't be that significant. It has to be one of multiple in my brain. So this at least follows that kind of direction of thought, which I'm totally on board with.
It's a multiverse idea, but a different multiverse.
It's not exact. I don't see it that way.
But
Yeah.
You're talking about the idea that big bangs could be taking place all over the place. But where's
no, that they would just happen.
Where's the over the place? What does over there even mean when you're talking about multiple big bangs? That's where it gets weird. Like, what is the over there even conceived of if you're talking about a time before time and space?
And
it's an oscillation.
And with this, I mean, like I mentioned, there are these gravitons and photons that are emitted and left over from the black holes. And so they don't experience time and space. And so we are creatures who experience time and space. And so to put ourselves in this, okay, if time and space don't exist to me, then is it a universe or is it a compressed space? Is it this little space that could be something? Or is it already something? Yeah. And
this is sounding like a Vonnegut novel. My favorite author.
And the other thing too is like I don't even know that we need to go to like gravitons. I mean, a photon of light itself doesn't experience time, right? So the most of the energy in the universe that we think of as the starlight that we see when we look out, that energy that's isn't experiencing time. Time is like a
It just
a
is.
thing
Yeah.
that happens when you get stuck with a bunch of mass. When things start strong and weak nuclear forcing together and they sort of fall out of phase with the rest.
And
of the
then
universe.
you have a big bang in the universe. Oh my gosh. And so, yeah. Well, who knows? One day the black holes may fizzle out and leave their ghosts behind.
Yes.
So, but it's interesting. So, like, even if we had a universe, maybe I'm starting to catch up to the story you told at the beginning of this segment. So, even if we have a universe that expands and contracts and comes and goes and does all this, because you got these emanations from black holes that aren't affected by the fact that time is going by and that universes have contracted and extend, that we've got all these gravitons, if they even exist, and things floating about. They've been through it a few times, but they just don't care that it's happening again because they're not experiencing the time in the same way that we are.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that this segment of the show is something that many people who live in California, Oregon, Colorado, what are the other states that have legalized cannabis?
Who cares?
Those are the only ones I know.
I don't even know if there are other states. I think those are all made up.
Yeah, well, anyway, can you tell me a little bit about some other research related to cannabis? Justin?
No, I don't have any research related to cannabis whatsoever.
What happened to the weed worms?
Oh, this is okay. How are people? It has an intro. How are people like hookworms?
Well, let's
I
see.
don't know.
They're hermaphroditic. No, they live in dirt. No,
No,
um,
they're parasites.
parasites. No, maybe depending.
Yeah.
They both have an endocannabinoid system.
Oh.
Endocannabinoids are cannabis-like molecules made naturally by our own bodies. Our body uses it to regulate our immune system, our behavioral activities, neuronal activity. As with cannabis, which, if you're not familiar with cannabis, that is this has the popular name of marijuana. As with marijuana, endocannabinoids can enhance feeding behavior and reduce pain and inflammation. That system may help the worm and its hosts. How could it be helping both of them? Well, you've got a parasite that's got, it's a hookworm, right? It's a worm with a big, round, gnashy teeth end of it, where it burrows in. And as it's burrowing in, there might be, a little bit of inflammation around the areas in which it is infiltrated. There's a wonderful story on, I think it's a Radio Lab, where they talk about this guy who went out and got hookworms because he had horrible allergies. He went out and got hookworms and found, one person's testimony here, that it beat his allergies. He doesn't have allergies anymore. He used to have the worst allergies. And the idea is that having these hookworms in his system primed the immune system to be not attacking itself in some way, with focus, attention, otherwise. But this is sort of interesting. This is now finding a mechanism for both releasing endocannabinoids in the worm as well as in the host. This is D. Patrizio, a physiologist specializing in endocannabinoid research. Cody voice. This system is known to dampen pain responses. Upon worm infection, the host's intestines produce these cannabis-like molecules, maybe as a safety net to dampen pain response. What we now have found is that the worms, too, are producing these natural cannabinoids throughout the infection process, and especially when the worms penetrate the skin, further dampening the host's pain response. This is advantageous to the worm because if the host could detect the parasites, it would respond to kill them. It's a pro-survival signaling pathway in the body that may have therapeutic advantage in treating worm infection. And then next on the Quotey Voice is immunologist and senior author Mira Giner. Until now, no one had investigated cannabinoids in worm infection. She's from the UCR School of Medicine. We found that endocannabinoids are elevated following worm infection, that they contribute to optimal worm expulsion from the host body. This is a protective pathway that operates within infection that we were unaware of before. To increase its chance of survival, the worm may use this pathway so the host increases its feeding behavior. That is, eats more food, and it can also reduce tissue damage and inflammation and pain caused. So
it makes the worm, it makes you have less pain.
Yes.
Makes you a little less sick because your immune system's damped down, and it makes you hungry so that you'll be healthy and give lots of support to the worm that's inside of you.
More nutrients for the worm to feed on. This is fantastic. I'm feeling great. I'm hungry and I feel good. And the worm's like, yes, this is exactly what I want for it.
Yes.
Happy host, happy parasitical life.
Yes.
Right? This is
only bad parasites kill their hosts.
right. And it's probably by accident. They usually don't.
They didn't mean to. They just got excited.
Unless it's part of reproduction, in which case there are no rules. Yeah, so this is a pretty cool. So yeah, upon this is back to D. Patrizio. The system is known to dampen pain responses. Upon worm infection, the host intestines produce these cannabis-like molecules, maybe as a safety net to dampen the pain response. So this is it's in mice, but it's the intestines of the host that are producing the molecules themselves. What we now have found is that the worms too are producing the cannabinoids. Everybody's just passing around these molecules to help them better get along. Yeah. So So we now found is that the worms too are producing these natural cannabinoids throughout the infection process, and especially when the worms penetrate the skin. Oh yeah, I already read that part. So this is kind of an interesting strategy. But I wonder how much of this too is connected to that Radiolab story of dampening sort of the response to infection that's taking place within this by having the hookworms. Maybe also is somehow regulating the allergic reaction that the body has. Now I want to know if people who smoke weed have less allergies. Like I need this correlative to at least tell me, like, is this just a hookworm thing, the priming of the immune system or the disregarding of parts of the immune system so the immune system isn't attacking itself? Is that an affect of the worm, or is it or does this happen to like weed smokers like not take Claritin? Like, I don't know if this is a thing or not. But
yeah,
I want to know.
It may depend on the specific endocannabinoid receptor that, say, THC or CBD end up connecting to within the body, right? So if
THC,
those aren't part of the system, if they're not the same cannabinoids as are produced or the same receptor target system as what you're talking about, then it won't make a difference. But
this all sounds like very much what the CBD, behavior, neuronal. This is sort of immune response. These are more CBD type things. THC is a psychoactive component, but it doesn't seem to be as involved in these regulatories. So I don't think it would be a THC thing. If you're playing along at home, it's probably more of a CBD type affect.
So
fascinating.
A quick Google tells me that there are potential interactions between smoking marijuana and taking antihistamines.
Interesting. Okay. That's very interesting.
This kind of follows the idea that they use similar receptors and things like that. I don't know.
I don't understand. What are you saying?
There are interactions. There are there are negative reactions that people have sometimes from smoking weed while on antihistamines, things that are against allergies. So there's, I'm finding some things about it on the internet, but especially because weed is newly legalized in a lot of places. There's not a huge background on this. But if there are counterindications and interactions, that would imply that they are using similar channels potentially.
So one of the things that's interesting that I think we're going to have to delve into a different story is that THC and CBD actually can do a competition. And so because not a lot of marijuana smokers are talking about, if you're talking smoking this stuff, you're talking about the THC. Okay. And if that's and if that's a competitive interference with cannabinoid receptors that would be doing the work of the antihistamines, then that's an interesting power struggle at play that it would be really interesting to get some. And I feel like I've read this study, and maybe I can bring it next week if I can go track it down. But they do compete. Like, part of what CBD does as a component of THC is it prevents the psychoactive effects. It does some behavior modifications. So the lower something is in CBD, likely the more psychoactive of a roller coaster.
Here you go.
Block each other. Yeah.
Here we go.
Here's a study from 2017, a paper from the Pulmonary Pharmacology and Therapeutics that says CBD treatments via weed have proven to stop the decrease of airway flow and make breathing easier when having allergies.
And actually the Radiolab kid was in asthma. He had big asthma attacks from his allergies. Wow.
So this is a potential. Again, all very new. TBD.
Things to look at. Yeah, TBD, more research necessary. But very, so many acronyms. Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, what about some single letter acronyms? A, B, AB, O.
Blood.
You guys are good. Yes. So researchers presenting results at the 256th National Meeting and Exposition of the American Chemical Society have reported on their new use of an enzyme that was discovered in gut microbes for turning blood types A and B into type O. Yeah, so our blood has the cells have these little sugars on the outside of them that identify what they are as either type A, type B, or O. And these sugars, if they can be removed, then the A and the B can be turned into the universal donor type O, right?
This is huge.
So if most people are types A and B or a combination of the two, O is not a very common type. Blair, you're type O, aren't you?
No, I'm AB positive, universal recipient.
Oh, that's right, recipient. All right, that's what it was. You just can take it from everyone, but you can't give it to everyone. There we go.
But now I could.
Potentially, yes. So this is a really interesting idea scientists have been trying to work on, is discover how they can snip off those little sugars to create more universal blood for everyone. And so what they have done is enzymes are great because enzymes catalyze reactions, right? And they go in and they can identify the sugar, like, chop, 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 and chop it up and then use it, and then you don't need it anymore. And so they're like, where can we get these? And they looked at a bunch of different places. And so researcher Stephen Withers, PhD from the University of British Columbia, he said, with metagenomics, you take all of the organisms from an environment and extract the sum total of DNA of those organisms, all mixed up together. And so they did that and then used E. coli to select for DNA containing genes that code for enzymes that can cut sugar residues. And there's a way of getting the information out of the environment and into the laboratory, and then screening the exact activity that they wanted. And they considered looking at DNA from mosquitoes and leeches, which they are organisms that degrade blood. And they thought that might work. But then they ultimately looked at the human gut microbiome and they found mucins. These are glycosylated proteins that line the gut wall, and they provide sugars serving as attachment points for gut bacteria, while also feeding them while those bacteria assist in digestion. And so some of those mucin sugars are very similar in structure to the antigens on A and B type blood. So they homed in on those enzymes, took those sugars off the mucin, and they found an entirely new family of enzymes that are 30 times more effective at removing red blood cell antigens than previously reported candidates. And so now they just have to go into testing and make sure with clinical trials that there are no adverse consequences, but they say they're really excited about the potential of this.
This is huge.
Yeah, who'd have thunk it? Bacteria in the gut giving us enzymes that could potentially lead to more blood for everyone. And another quick story related to enzymes that also came out of the American Chemical Society national meeting is a group of researchers who from Pennsylvania State University who have used enzymes to create these little tiny pumps that when attached to a gel surface that they don't move on, it creates they pump fluid through their chemical. The enzymes are like little machines, and by their movement and the movement of fluid through them, they can pump themselves up a gradient of a chemical gradient of whatever that they've been selected for. And so they've created these little tiny nanobots out of enzymes. And the goal, the enzymes that they are doing, that they're working on specifically, break down organophosphates that are used as nerve agents. So chemical weapons that are nerve agents and cause nerve damage, we don't have a lot of things that can fix that. And so this would be a potential, like, could you imagine a little team of nanobots that aren't really bots, but technically they are. They're just enzyme pumps that go in and swim up the organophosphate chemical gradient in your blood, going toot, 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 toot. I give you the antidote.
Wow.
Yeah, little swimmy
That is
enzymes.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting. And so the researchers say the enzyme actively pumps in the organophosphate compound and destroys it, and at the same time pumps out an antidote. And the system requires no external power source because the enzyme is actually fueled by the organophosphate itself. So as long as it's there, the enzyme will use it, catalyze the reaction, break it down, and depower it.
That's a really great analogy, though, that you've got there. That enzymes are the robots of the microbial world.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about the microbial world, it's almost entirely run by robots. But that's kind of like, that's sort of the thing that it is. It's molecular machinery that does everything that need doing or can be done or is done. It's the thing. It's very, life isn't all blood cells, corpuscles. It's mostly these little robots that are doing the work.
Yep, the little machines, micro machines of biology.
Micro machines.
Yeah. Hey, the eclipse was last year. Did you see everyone on social media
Are you
reliving
still
the
talking about
experience?
it? Are you still talking about the eclipse? It's
Yeah.
been a year.
That's what everybody's talking about. But
No,
there's
talking
a
about that.
well, some
Except the
scientists.
people who saw it.
Yeah, some scientists were studying social aspects of the solar eclipse, and they reported data. So researchers from Murray State University.
I know what the data says. It says everybody saw it but Justin.
Everybody saw it. Everybody saw it from. Everybody saw it. Everybody saw it but Justin, and they were all high.
Really?
These researchers looked at 2 towns in Kentucky on a normal week and the 4th of July, and then they looked at the solar eclipse in one town and the first week of a college semester in another. And so they looked at wastewater in the city as a record of what people are doing. So they looked at sewage water, basically. What goes in comes out, and drugs show up in that sewage water. And the researchers say within 24 hours, they can get all the results. They took samples before, during, and after these big events and the normal week, and they sampled them in the lab, and they found a noticeable effect on drug use. The 4th of July and the solar eclipse produced significant spikes in a range of drugs from weed to cocaine to MDMA when compared to a baseline reading.
So does
Now-
this mean
now,
they
to
need
be
to
fair-
amp up their filters in the wastewater treatment plants on these holidays? Is that the implication of
What?
this?
Get better
I
filters.
just want to point out that a lot of people went to go see the eclipse
Mhm.
in more rural areas.
And that is
where they
one
were
big
getting a little
question.
relaxed and camping and maybe taking their shoes off. And this could just be that they all came back with hookworms.
It's not hookworms, but it is a question of there is a question of whether or not the results that they saw, the increase, was simply due to more people coming to the areas for these big events,
Mhm.
as opposed to people increasing their usage because more people
Right,
travel to those
right.
areas. So there's no way to tell that apart. All they know is that the concentration in the water increased during as compared to
Now,
And-
if it's the concentration, wouldn't that indicate the higher use? I mean,
Well-
other than that, like the idea that everybody
There's
who
more
goes,
people.
what it says is everyone who goes and gets in a car and drives for 12 or 20 hours to see an eclipse is probably somebody who gets high.
Right.
That's possible. Also, Dave Shorty in the chat room says, how much of that is people flushing away their stash? Which
None.
it's possible you bought some while you're there, had to leave state lines, had to get on a plane. You're like, oh no, I have some left. Better get rid of it.
Why would you get rid of it that way?
Well, it's an interesting question.
I
Social
don't know.
dynamics in these big celebratory events. What are we doing? And, how are we doing it? What are we doing? Blair, do you have a couple of stories to end the show?
I do. Speaking of what are we doing when it comes to exotic pets like snakes and lizards, it's always the best selling species that are the most likely to be released and become invasives, which makes sense. So Rutgers University, New Brunswick was looking at 1,722 reptile and amphibian species in the U.S. exotic pet trade from 1999 to 2016 and compared their list with data from citizen science projects looking at non-native species identified in the United States. They found that the most popular pets, those imported in high numbers and sold at low prices, usually when they're small, are most likely to become dumped in the wild later on. So this is a question of, as I often say at my day job, before you get any pet, you have to ask, how big does it get? If
Wait,
it's a python and it's a baby and it's 2 feet long and it's going to get to be 30 feet and you don't know that, guess what? You're going to want to get rid of your snake. Yes, Justin?
Hand in the back of the room. Yeah, what kind of animals are we talking about? Like, I'm not somebody who understands what people buy as pets.
Snakes and lizards. So Burmese pythons are a great example. They're the main invasive in Florida. They're eating native wildlife. They are the longest snake on the planet. They can get up to 30 feet long. So they are sold as pets when they're 2 feet long. Because snakes look the same when they're babies as when they're adults, just smaller, people don't know how big they're going to get. They get too big. They go, oh, I saw a snake the other day. Let me just release it. The other thing we're talking about is turtles and tortoises. So in California, for example, one of the biggest problems of invasive species is the red-eared pond slider. Turtles live 30 to 80, sometimes over 100 years. People don't know that. They buy the little baby turtle at the store and they don't know that they're stuck with an animal forever. They release it when they see another turtle. Frogs and toads are another really big one. Bullfrogs, a lot of them were former pets. They're released into the wild. So how long does it live? How big does it get? And what does it eat? That's what you need to know before you get a pet. And before anybody ever rescues a pet, they need to know those things and expect to take care of that animal for that animal's entire life. And releasing animals into the wild is bad, as we've talked about on the show a bunch. So this study in particular suggests providing better information about future growth and lifespan of exotic pets, along with the ecological damage that can result from releasing them when they sell them. I'm a little concerned about that because that's probably going to hurt sales. So we have to find a way to level out the legal sale of potential invasives while increasing knowledge and finding this. But so this is something I would have anticipated, but it's nice to see the data kind of reflecting it so we know how to attack it.
And isn't 30-foot long pythons an improvement to Florida?
No. And I have one more story about human impact on the planet. It's all about contact lenses. I'm wearing them right now. A lot of people wear daily contact lenses. I will say I wear 6-month semi-permanent contact lenses. Anyway, the way people get rid of these contacts and their impact on the oceans is something that has not been studied too closely. And some recent piece of research has found that 15 to 20% of contact wearers in the United States are doing what with them? Flushing them down the sink or toilet.
No.
That is a problem because there are around 45 million people in the United States wearing contact lenses. Some of them are daily contact lenses. Some of them are weekly. Some of them are bi-weekly. Not many of them are 6-month lenses like I'm wearing. So 15 to 20% of 45 million people potentially a day flushing these things is a problem because they're made out of plastic, of course. They're made out of polymethyl methacrylate, silicones, and fluoropolymers. And this is so it's kind of porous, so you can get gas exchange to your eye, right? But water treatment plants are not well equipped to take care of these things. They sink to the bottom of the water table, and they have found that the bonds of these things change from sitting in water treatment, but they actually turn into microplastics. So it's
Which don't
another
get filtered
contributor.
and more contributor plastics in the environment.
Right. So at minimum, they're
joy.
calling for improved labeling on packaging, explaining how to dispose of contact lenses. If they make it into landfill, they are not nearly as detrimental to the environment. But I would argue, I know I'm a little biased, that we should also be promoting we should be pushing people away from daily contact use, because not only is it the contacts themselves, but the
packaging.
containers they come in, the packaging is very wasteful. It's almost all plastic. So your contact lenses, another element to consider with your impact on the global ecosystem.
Which just brings me to a thing that I've been fighting for years now, which is just larger fonts.
Larger fonts, yeah. Justin, without contacts or glasses, I would die. I would literally die. Like, that's not an exaggeration.
Not the fonts. It's not the fonts.
It's beyond the font. I've run into doors.
All you have to do is increase the magnification on the resolution magnification on your screen. That's what you do. Yeah. I'm wondering though, I mean, it was plastic straws the week before. Now it's the plastic contact lenses. And so I'm just wondering if it's like the plastic or maybe it was once a month. One was July and one's August. So I'm wondering, is this the disposable plastic of the month media parade? Are we just trying to teach people all of their bad habits? Just one new one every month.
And that's part of it, is I don't want to tell people stop using plastic because you'll just give up. It's pretty much impossible in the current life that we live. But just be more cognizant of how much plastic exists in your life. And if you have an option for a lesser plastic option or a paper wrapped option or a wax paper option, take that instead.
Try it. Wax paper contacts for your eyes. Sure. Hey, do you know Steve?
No.
No, you don't know Steve? Well,
Is
Steve
that
is
the MySpace guy? What was his name?
I don't know about that.
No.
What I do know is that Steve is this
Sounds
really interesting atmospheric phenomenon that seems to occur along with the northern lights. So people have thought it is an auroral phenomenon, but the aurora usually is this kind of hazy glow along the horizon and into the night sky that ebbs and fades, whereas Steve is a bright jet of a stream of purplish light that shoots across the sky, sometimes as far as like 600 miles. It's intense. It's different. And so even though it was once thought to be an auroral phenomenon, researchers have just published a paper saying, nope. No, it's not. It is different. We have determined that Steve is not an aurora.
Oh.
It's not an aurora.
Just some guy with a really powerful flashlight.
Yeah, so it was a group of Northern Light viewers who saw Steve and they dubbed it Steve. But then the researchers starting to study it, they decided they'd actually give it an acronym so that it now Steve stands for Strong Thermal Emission Velocity Enhancement.
Mm.
And so the study found Steve is just, it's not a it's not an aurora. It has different characteristics entirely, and they believe that it's occurring in a slightly different layer of the atmosphere than the aurora itself. And so the particles that are involved in it might be slightly different, and the dynamics could be different. And it's still a mystery that as of now, researchers are just calling a sky glow. Steve the
is
sky glow.
Sky glow.
Yeah, Steve the sky glow.
Mhm.
What can you do? Anyway, researchers are going to keep looking at Steve to try and figure out what is going on, whether or not it's something happening in the ionosphere. They're going to be taking observations at different levels of the atmosphere to figure out the causes of Steve.
Is Steve always purple?
I think so. Pinkish or purple. Yeah. It's a different color. Yeah.
Take your word for it.
Well, the color thing is interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah. Because the
it-
color probably you can infer certain characteristics of the particles or what's involved in it energetically from the color.
Right, energetically from it, and also like I'm sort of picturing that the atmosphere is spitting out sort of like you would get from a prism when it separates light and it shoots it back at you, right? And you can sort of separate the colors of the rainbow with a prism. Or if you look north and the sun is behind you and the sun's rays hit the moisture, the molecules of moisture and the little droplets of moisture in the atmosphere, and they come back at you at the right 45-ish degree angle, and you see the rainbow. Which, by the way, indigo is not a color in the rainbow. That's a lie.
So,
but what I was picturing is like purple makes it through, but the rest of the rainbow
maybe doesn't.
is going out into space, and we never see it. Like there's some weird affect of the way it's being split. We're only getting that one spectrum from a point that we can see it.
Nobody knows.
Well,
nobody knows.
We will know. Nobody knows now. But we'll figure this one out.
Yes.
Steve, I know you aren't saying yet why you're purple, but we will find out. Because inquiring minds now are just obsessed with why Steve is purple.
They are. And I hope that everyone in our audience is now obsessed with Steve, the purple sky glow. All right. This brings us to the end of another episode of This Week in Science. Are we done, you guys?
We're done.
We are done. Put a fork in us. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of This Week in Science. Thank you for your help, Identity 4. Thank you for helping to record the show. Fada, thank you for your help with the show notes, social media, all the wonderful work that you do every week. My co-hosts, thank you for another fun-filled evening of science. Everyone in the chat rooms, thank you for being here while we broadcast live. It's so wonderful to have a live audience. And everyone in your cars, on your buses, wherever you are, thank you for just being here and enjoying the science. And now it's my turn to say thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Paul Disney, not Paul Dizzy, Paul Disney, G. Burton Lattimore, Richard Onimus, Ed Dyer, Ken Hayes, Harrison Prather, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Andy Gross, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Stony Steele, Craig Landon, John Ratnaswamy, Mark Massaros, Jack Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill K, Bob Calder, Time Jumper 319, Kyle Washington, Eric Knapp, Richard Brian Condren, Aiden Jeff, Jacqueline Boyster, Noodles, hi, Kevin Reardon, Dave Neighbor, Christoph Zuknarek, Noah Zemke, Jim Seabright, Ashish Pants, Ulysses Adkins, Sarah Chavis, Richard Porter, Artyom, Rick Ramus, Paul, John McKee, Jason Olds, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dreyer, Lisa Slazuski, Jim Drapeau, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Ben Rothig, Steve Lessman, Kurt Larson, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie Gary S., Robert, Greg Briggs, Brendan Minish, Christopher Rappin, Flying Out, Aaron Luthen, Matt Sutter, Mark Hessenflow, Kevin Parachan, Byron Lee, E.O., Mark Tyrone Fong, and Keith Corsell. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. If you are interested in helping us out on Patreon, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience. Remember, all of you can help out just by listening to TWIS. And if you have a friend who's interested in science, maybe help spread the word if you feel the need. And on next week's show, we will be back once again with more science news for you. We will have an interview next week. We are speaking with Anil Ananthaswamy about his new book about the double slit experiment. One of your favorites, Justin.
I love this. Is my favorite. It's the one that's the most mind-boggling. If you already know what it is, I don't even have to tell you how mind-boggling. But if you've never heard of the double slit experiment, if it's possible that somebody in the sound of my voice has not heard of this, just Google it. It is really unintuitive.
Yes. Anil Ananthaswamy is a science writer who has written several wonderful books over the years. I've had the luck to speak with him on previous occasions. His new book is called Through Two Doors at Once, and we'll be talking about the experiment, the double slit experiment, and his research into it and his storytelling all around it. I think that'll be a lot of fun. We hope that you will join us next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time for that show and that interview. You can watch us live, join the chat room at twist.org/live. You can also join the chat room on our YouTube channel. Look for This Week in Science on YouTube. But if you can't make it, don't worry, because past episodes are always going to be found at the YouTube channel and at twist.org.
Yes. And thank you for enjoying the show as you have thus far. But if you didn't get enough, TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science in your iTunes directory. Or if you have a mobile type device, you can look for TWIS, the number 4 droid app in the Android marketplace, or simply This Week in Science in anything Apple Marketplace.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes will be available on our website. What's our website? Well, it's www.twist.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the hosts or other listeners.
Or you can contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, someone in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into oblivion. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, please remember,
it's all in your head. wrong song.
I still like that song.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. This week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma. Got the eye. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. So how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you learned anything from the words that we said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.
We did it. We made it through another episode. All the way to the end. To the end of the show. We did it. I'm closing lots of windows. Closing lots of windows. Look at me screen sharing. I'll stop that now. Closing all the windows. We made it to the end of everything. I mean, not the end of everything. The end of the show. Faux show. You guys have a good show last week?
Yeah, we had a good one. We missed you though.
Yeah, I missed you guys. It's New York hotel room. There's no way. I was laughing. I was like, what if I did it from the bathroom? I could sit in the tub on hotel Wi-Fi, sit on the tub.
Sure.
I was like, yeah, no, I don't think that'll work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was good. It was nice to have a trip to New York. That was fun.
Bet.
I got to meet Ira Flatow.
No.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It was very cool. I got to sit through a taping of Science Friday.
Wow. I've been listening to Science
It
Friday
was very awesome.
so long. I remember when I was in college. When I was in college and I was driving my really terrible 2-seater that like the CD crapped out, the CD player, and it was just radio. I would listen to Science Friday when I drove home to do an overnight at the zoo. It was like my ritual. Listen to Science Friday while I drove back to the zoo from college.
Nice.
Oh my goodness. What a funny celebrity to
Sorry
meet,
about that.
because I feel like, yeah, I would recognize his voice like that, but I have no idea what he looks like. Not
Yeah.
a clue.
He's a nice guy. Just seemed like, he's into science. He's a thoughtful, nice person. He's got a great team of people working with him. He's got this good radio show going. Yeah. But the most fun for me was to sit through the radio taping, and see all of this stuff that they do, like they have like this 10-second delay of airtime that they do. So they start the show and then they have like this gap of 10 seconds that they have to count down, and everything is by the clock.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
so they've got the director who's directing, and he has these hand motions to let people know this is happening now, and he counts things down. And then there's the engineer who brings in the guests on the various, the ISDN line or on Skype or whatever else she's using. And then there are the different producers who produce each of the stories. They come up with questions that
What are we talking about?
they come up with the Science Friday and how they produce it. So Ira is, he has his own thoughts about the different stories ahead of time, but he's the host, and the producers actually give him a lot of information. They find the guests, they come up with the questions very often, and they feed things to him. And it was really fun to listen to the producers in the production room, like when Ira would go off on his own tangent of what he wanted to ask, and the producer would be like, that's not the question that was supposed to be next. And the producers would get all upset. They'd be like, that's a different direction.
That's an interesting thing. And it's one of the things that, like, I think differentiates this show from a lot of other shows, which is that
there's no
plan. No cast of people behind us.
Yeah.
This is like,
it's the Wild West.
Well, I don't mean to suggest it's the Wild West. But I do sort of think like this is a producer run show where the people in our ears are us, right?
Mhm.
Like we're the show itself. Like there's nobody behind the curtain who is prompting or informing the show. We're kind of out there without a net at times, but also it's there's like if you think that you like a commentator on a news show and are mortified to find out that they don't write the content of the show, right? Like, so actually it turns out like this. Okay, here's the one example I can really think of right off the cut is that I thought Seinfeld was a great show. And I thought Jerry Seinfeld was brilliant. I thought the guy who plays, I can't remember people's names.
Jason Alexander.
Thank you. I was going to call him George Costanza.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
I'm like, these people are brilliant. They do such a great job. And then I watched Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I realized, they are all pretending to be different aspects of Larry David.
Yeah.
Like this is the entire show is just Larry David not being willing to be in front of camera yet and having actors play out things that he thought of. And then he does a show without a script where he just goes out and tells actors to react to the stuff he says and the directions he takes. And you go, wow, as much as I thought I liked the people or the writers behind or something about Seinfeld, actually I was just massively enamored with the way Larry David's mind works. And this is one of the right. So like so fear not if you like or dislike any one of the hosts of this show. It's very likely and legitimately an honest feeling because there is no other layer to this. This is who we are, and what we're doing is exactly raw the thing, right? That's it.
Well, it's like seared, lightly seared.
Wait, what? I don't even.
Just because we do a tiny bit of prep. It's not 100% raw.
So and this comes on the heels.
Yeah, we read the stories. We look into stuff ahead of time. I make sure I know what I'm talking about before I get on the show.
It's not totally raw.
Oh, you guys do that? Okay. Oh, so there could be another layer to this show that I'm not even aware of myself now, and I'm just now coming to terms with that. You guys read the stories ahead of time? Doesn't that ruin like how surprised you are at how they end?
You're funny. You're funny. Now, what I was thinking after watching the Science Friday taping and how they run it with all the different layers and the people involved, I like had this, it's this little thought experiment. I was like, oh man, what if we did expand a bit? What would we do? And how would I break down like the how would I break down the various aspects of the project, the labor? Would I want would I really want somebody feeding me stories? Like, is that what I don't think I would want that. I mean, I kind of like the actual digging into things and learning things myself. So I don't know.
Well,
yeah, an engineer would be cool to just.
An engineer would be cool. I was also thinking it would be fun to get somebody on who could actually be like a producer in the sense of like running down and emailing people to get in more interviews more often, and actually, there are certain aspects of things that it would be like, oh, have someone else do that. That would be nice.
So okay, so I've thought about this quite a bit.
Or somebody
myself.
who's an editor. No, edit. I don't know.
I've thought about this quite a bit, and usually the things I gravitate towards are what you just said. Somebody who does a lot of the phone calling, interview setting up, the trolling for what's interesting out there. There's also like I think I have in the past massively undercut the collaborative aspect. This show, by the way, is ensemble. This show is not collaborative. This is and there is an element of this show that could be collaborative, which is that like we spend our entire week hanging out together and looking over the stories that the other people brought and said, I think you should bring this aspect to this show. We have no collaboration. We're an ensemble cast of people who bring disparate stories and then we learn about them from each other. We don't spend time working on stories together or looking at these things ahead of time, which is also something that endears me about the show is that what you see in terms of us hearing about each other's stories is live. It is in real time. And that's kind of beautiful. But I do understand that there could be a collaborative nature of having 2 or 3 really smart people behind me who say like, here's things that you've like, following Justin's lead because, hey, I'm the talent on this aspect of the ensemble. You both are too. But like, Justin, Here's a story you missed, and here's a couple of the things that you would normally take a take on, but I want you to read this and read it. Like, having really smart people behind you can be awesome. Like, that would be very cool. That would actually increase my killing power. Be able to, or whatever the thing is that you would want to have more of.
Right. Yeah. You'd have you have conversations and figure out like, oh, the questions you want to ask or the angle you want to take ahead of time, and somebody else thinks on those angles for you. But
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that's interesting, and I think it was nice to see that although Ira has producers, coming up with the stories and the questions and kind of the flow of everything for him, he still is his own person. He's the host of the show, and he can take any story any direction that he wants to take it at any time. So if he decides, I'm going to do this question, he still is tied to the time limit that the director gives. Where'd Blair go? She went away. It's an interesting thing.
It's funny I came up with the Larry David.
I see Fada. I see you, Fada. I see you bouncing up and down over there in the chat room.
It's funny I came up with the Larry David Seinfeld analogy earlier because somebody sent me, I think it might have been the first Larry David show, an excerpt of it, where Larry goes over to his best friend's house. They just bought a brand new house, and Larry David's best friend offers Larry David's best friend's wife offers him a tour of the house, and he's like, nah, I'm good. She's like, well, you don't want to see the house? No, it looks great. But I get it. There's a room over there. There's a room over there. There's some bathrooms. I don't need to see it.
I don't need to see it. I see it. It's fine. It's a house. That's great.
And that's sort of my attitude also towards having like a writing staff. Like, I get it. You're going to be like, there's a room here. There's a bathroom over here. There's probably a hallway or two like that you would have me walk down. I get it. I don't need to see it.
Like Carrie Rootens in the YouTube chat room says, I'd get more bored if it was smart people feeding Justin good stories just for him to make a joke of it.
No, because it would. This is what would happen. The ear and the voice, I would have to break the fourth wall and be like, my producer has just said that not a lot of people are actually interested in 4 billion year old lichen growths on rocks. I don't know that I disagree with that, but I'm still going to tell you this story because I find it interesting and don't care that nobody else cares.
And I see a new bit appearing in the show where Justin suddenly grabs his headphones as if it's an earpiece and starts talking about his producer.
Yeah.
Excuse me for a moment. My producer is letting me know that we have a
like, no, I understand. No, I didn't. It's not that I'm opposed to all ties. I just didn't like the one you picked out. Yeah, that's why I'm wearing a t-shirt.
That's right.
Okay.
Minion Monkey in the YouTube chat room wants to know what happens when you don't get enough sleep. Well, you get tired
and drunk. It's basically I'm drunk.
When it's like getting drunk. So if and he's asking specific, or I don't know, Minion Monkey, I don't know, sex Z is wondering if it's more like going like 48 plus hours without sleeping. Yes, you're starting to get into the territory for sure of memory loss and behavioral changes.
Okay.
Your reflexes will be slower, and it is people who are on lack of sleep very often can come across as drunk. Some people can over time start slurring their speech. Your muscles don't work as well. There's just general fatigue. Your gut gets all messed up as well. Yeah, there's neural problems because metabolites and things start building up that normally sleep helps you get rid of. So
what's weird though about this, and again, I'm going to make an arcane television reference because this is the only way I know the world. Does everybody remember the WKRP episode.
In Cincinnati.
Where Johnny Fever and Venus
Where he-
Flytrap.
Where he yells
They-
booger.
No, where they're drinking on the air and they got a CHP officer and he's testing reactions and Johnny Fever actually keeps getting quicker.
He gets
as time
faster.
goes by.
I love that one.
Get better. And the CHP officers or the highway patrol person is like, this doesn't make any sense. I've actually noticed that if I have a really, really horrible, and this is probably, I'm probably telegraphing some sort of mental or personality or defect or some sort of thing that's a DMSO disorder. But if I have a really, hang on, I lost my video. I accidentally hit a button. If I have a really bad night's sleep, my next day on the 2.5, 3 hours of maybe sleep, even if even that day, I'm actually more focused and cognitively in the moment than if I got a full night's sleep. And
Did you drink a bunch of coffee that morning because you were tired?
But I do that anyway.
Okay, you don't think it's more than normal?
No, there's only so much a human can consume and be peeing and still be at work, right? Like no, but there's this it's probably what is quantified as attention deficit disorder, which I like to think as multi-track mental enthusiasm superpower. But there's something about a depressed amount of sleep which only allows my mind to work on 1 or 2 tracks. And so I seem to be much more focused and much more able to take on all the tasks within a day with great efficiency if I had a horrible night's sleep. And it's one of those things because you worry about it. It's like, oh, I didn't sleep. Now I got this full day ahead, like kind of like today. This is full day ahead, and I'm going to be a zombie. I just, you have that fear, that anxiety, like I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do today because I didn't rest. And every time I've run into this, the day that precedes is actually well handled. And it's the day when I'm like, no, it's the day when I got plenty of sleep, plenty of rest, and I go into that next day, and again, this is multi-track attention interest the thing I made up to counter the deficit sort of thing. The day when I got enough rest, the brain is too muddled with energy to pull itself in different directions to be able to have an efficient anything take place. So
right. So you're more tired, so you're able to focus actually, whereas when you have more energy, you get more easily distracted.
Totally distractible, easily distractible, constantly multi-track, eight-track player of distraction on full rest.
Yeah, that could make kind of that makes sense. Identity 4 says that his record for not sleeping is 6 days. What?
So
how did you not die?
I normally am asleep within 5 to 10 minutes, dead asleep all night, wake up with my alarm. Normally sleep somewhere between 6.5 to 8 hours.
You're not human.
But when I don't get a good night's sleep, which happens maybe 4 times a year, I know, sob. I often end up going home sick. My brain does not work to the extent that, I'm someone will be talking at me for minutes and I'll just be like, I'm sorry, what? Can you start over? I can't process speech. I can't focus. I'm a pile of garbage. So a good and bad to that. I don't respond well to the stress of less sleep.
Yeah. My sleep, I wish I could sleep that easily. I take a really long time to fall asleep, and then I wake up a lot during the night, and then I wake up in the morning looking at my alarm going, damn you.
Man.
That sounds, I think I'm a little more in Kiki's camp with this.
Yeah, I'm kind of terrified for if I end up having children.
Why are you terrified of your children?
Well, if she
sleep
were to have
schedules.
kids and the lack of sleep. Yeah.
Yeah,
What?
sleep
Mhm. But
schedules.
maybe they'd be like you and just sleep.
Just sleep through the night. Oh gosh, I hope.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Who knows?
Oh my goodness. Speaking of sleeping, it's 10:30 and I
Yes.
have a young one here with me who needs to go to bed. Just time for
turn
bed.
to Dr.
Yeah.
Mommy.
Yeah.
Time to put my child to bed. His iPad's about to run out of juice anyway, and he'll be like, I need to
my
plug it in. And I'll be like,
Okay.
it doesn't matter. It's time for bed.
I have a quick question for you both once we're off air, but in the meantime, good night, Justin. Say good night, Justin.
Good
No,
night,
wait.
Justin.
Oh, when we're off
Say
air.
good night, Blair.
Good night, Blair.
Good
night,
night, Kiki.
Good night, everyone. We'll see you next week. Looking forward to our interview and looking forward to seeing you again. Have a science-y in between.
Oh.
Good night. Where's that button? Stopping broadcast.